Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Can you guess what system that we are going to explore today? Yes, it's right. It's your breathing system, which we call respiratory system. Hi, welcome to MOOC BHS130 Anatomy and Physiology 1. My name is Franilia Francis, and I will be talking to you and sharing with you about the topic respiratory system. I do hope you have actually viewed the video which has been posted for you to have an overview of the respiratory system. Are you excited to know how your lungs breathe, how your lungs work? So let's not wait further ado and let's dive into the respiratory system. Okay, before we go further, let's see what is the learning outcome for this topic. So at the end of this session, the students will be able to describe the anatomy and primary functions of the respiratory system. Alright, as you have reviewed the video earlier on, you can see that the respiratory system can be divided into two parts, the upper respiratory tract and the lower respiratory tract. The upper respiratory tract refers to the nose, the pharynx, the nasal cavity, paranasal sinuses, and larynx. On the other hand, the lower respiratory tract includes the trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli. You will see the picture shortly. So you can see the picture on the left side of this slide that you will notice that there are two division of the respiratory system, the upper respiratory tract, which includes the nose, the nasal cavity, paranasal sinuses, pharynx, and larynx. And the lower respiratory tract includes the trachea, the bronchi, bronchioles, the lungs, and the alveoli. The respiratory system is also classified into zones, and it can be separated into two zones known as the conducting zones and respiratory zones. The first zone is known as conducting zone that refers to the structures that transport air but does not play any role in gas exchange. This includes the nasal cavity, nasopharynx, oropharynx, laryngopharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and all bronchioles except for respiratory bronchioles. These structures transport, filter, humidify, and warm the air. The other zone is known as respiratory zone, refers to the structures where oxygen, O2, and carbon dioxide CO2 exchange. The site of gas exchange are known as alveoli. Singularly, we call it alveolus. All respiratory zone structures contain alveoli, including the respiratory bronchioles, alveolar ducts, and alveolar sacs. So here is the picture that shows the conducting zone and respiratory zone. On the left side is the conducting zone. As mentioned, the trachea, the bronchi, and the bronchioles, except for terminal bronchioles, which is the respiratory zone, includes the alveoli. Alveolus is the singular noun for alveoli. Now let's move on with the respiratory functions of the respiratory system. So the first one is that it helps in gas exchange between the air and circulating blood, followed by moving air from the exchange surface of the lungs. Thirdly, production of vocal sounds that produce the voices. Fourthly, provision for olfactory sensations, or we call it smell. And last but not least is regulation of blood pH by moving air from the surface of the lungs. Well, you will come across the term respirations and breathing. It is used interchangeably, however, it does carry different meaning. Now, in anatomy and physiology, respiration refers to a process of gas exchange. So let's look at what is respiration. So firstly, the air have to move from outside into the lungs. And then in the lungs, there will be a gas exchange between the blood and the air. And this is what we call external respiration. So what happens during the gas exchange is that the oxygen will enter the lungs, whereas the carbon dioxide will be actually breathed out from the lungs. And what happened to the oxygen that is being breathed in, it will be transported into the blood, and then the oxygen will be carried on a hemoglobin to the cells, and there will be gas exchange between the blood and body cells, and this is what we call the internal respiration. Now in these cells we do have what we call cellular respirations, where there is an oxygen use and the production of carbon dioxide at a cellular level. That's why the name is cellular, because it comes from the cell. Moving on with respiratory mucosa, the one that lines along the respiratory tract, we have the respiratory epithelium, consists of columnar and pseudostratified. In chapter 2, you have learned the types of the cells arrangement. Okay, columnar is because it comes from the word column, so the shape of it is column, and pseudostratified is and actually look-alike. Stratified is multiple, so look-alike multiple, and there is underlying connective tissue, and there is respiratory membrane supported by lamina propria that can change along the tract. It lines the respiratory mucosa lines conducting portion of the respiratory tract, and it is protected from contamination by the respiration defense systems such as macrophages. We have all the soldiers that can help to defend the mechanism. So what is the function of respiratory mucosa? The mucous membrane warms and moistens the air and traps particles, or basically most of the time is the dust. And you can see on the right side of your slide is that the picture of the mucous membrane along the respiratory tract that has the mucus layer, and we have cilia, is the hair-like component that helps to brush the dust out from the throat. So that's a little bit of the introduction of the respiratory system. So let's dive in further and let's see the first part of the structure, the upper respiratory tract, which consists of the nostrils, the nose, and the nasal cavity, so a little bit on the mouth, and then you have your pharynx, also known as throat, and then we have the larynx, also known as voice box. Firstly, the nose. So the nose bones and cartilage supports the nose. There are two openings, as you can see in the picture. They are known as nostrils, and inside the nostrils there are hair that filters large particles. Nasal cavity. Nasal cavity is the hollow space behind the nose. And then we have nasal septum, the bottom part photo. You can see the septum is the one that divides the nasal cavity and also the nostrils. And we have head palate, the floor of nasal cavity, which is found in your mouth, actually at the top of the mouth, and this separates between your nose and your mouth cavity. Nasal conchae. Bony ridges called nasal conchae are bones that divide the nasal cavity, support the mucous membranes, and increase the surface area. It is divided into three parts. We have superior nasal conchae, middle nasal conchae, and inferior nasal conchae. Now superior simply means on top, inferior means below. So you can see the arrangement is top, middle, and below. Let's talk more about nasal cavity. So we have this paranasal sinus that opens into the nasal cavity and is lined with mucous membrane. And around the nasal cavity and your eyes, we have these nasolacrimal ducts, which is the eyes to the nasal cavity. I will show you the picture shortly. Olfactory, or we call it smell receptor, is found on the superior part of the nasal cavity. Remember, superior is top. The cavity itself is lining with stratified squamous epithelium tissues with coarse hair that trap dust or large particles in the air. And this nasal cavity is near the pharynx. The cavity lining by pseudostratified columna is associated with goblet cells. And this lining helps to do the sneeze reflex. So here you can see that paranasal sinuses are spaces within the bones that reduce the weight of the skull and are resonant chambers for the voice. There are 4 sinuses: frontal, ethmoid, sphenoid, and maxillary sinuses, which you can learn further in the musculoskeletal topic. Now, if you have recalled earlier, I have mentioned about nasolacrimal duct, and this is lacrimal duct on the left side of the picture. And you can see that the nasolacrimal duct is connected to the eyes because it is the eyes to the nasal cavity. And normally this is where when you use the eye drop, you need to press it at the tip and tip of the nasolacrimal duct so that you cannot it will not drain into your nose and then from the nose into your mouth, so that you will not taste the bitterness of the eye drop. And on the right side of the picture, you will see that the olfactory nerves and olfactory receptor is found on the superior part of the nasal cavity, which is on the top of the nasal cavity. Now this is again another picture to show you the goblet cells that produce mucus that helps to line the tract of the respiratory system. Now let's move on with the next part of the upper respiratory tract, which is the pharynx. The pharynx is divided into 3 sections, and it is shared by both digestive and respiratory system. So we have the first one, nasopharynx, composed of pseudostratified columna. It is the superior portion, the first part, that is enclosed by the uvulas during swallowing. As you can see in the picture, the uvula is found in the tongue, the one entangling inside your mouth. And then we followed by oropharynx, composed of stratified squamous. It is continuous with the oral cavity. And the third part is the laryngopharynx, from the tip of the epiglottis until the esophagus. So the next part is to show you the picture of the pharynx. The pharynx is actually behind the oral cavity, as you can see in the picture, between the nasal cavity and the larynx. It is actually a space, not a structure. So as I have explained earlier, it is composed of 3 parts: nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. So after we have seen pharynx, let's move on with the larynx. So larynx is below the pharynx. It is the enlargement at the top of the trachea, before the trachea, but after the pharynx, so below the pharynx. The air passes through the glottis on the way to the lungs, through C4 to C6, the cartilage number 4 and 6. And the larynx protects the glottis and houses the vocal cords. This is where the voices, the sound comes in. There are 9 cartilages of the larynx. The first 3 large cartilages are known as thyroid, or we call it Adam's apple. Normally it's very prominent in male. Okay, and then we have cricoid and epiglottis, and then we have 3 paired cartilages, meaning to say 2 each, which is cuneiform, corniculate, and arytenoids. Now arytenoids can change position and the tension of the vocal cords. So here you can see the picture of the larynx from the anterior view and sagittal view. Anterior means from the front, sagittal means from the side. So in the picture you can see the cuneiform cartilage, and then the arytenoid cartilage. You can see the cricoid cartilage and the thyroid cartilage, which is also known as the Adam's apple. Now the unique feature of the larynx is that it has these 2 parts, glottis and epiglottis. Now glottis is a triangular slit that opens during breathing or talking but closes during swallowing. Epiglottis, epi means on top, so epiglottis means on top of glottis, is a flap-like structure that stands upright and allows air to enter the larynx. And while swallowing, it presses downward and prevents the food from entering air passages into the trachea. So it allows the food, it goes into the esophagus behind the trachea. So here you can see the picture of the glottis and epiglottis. As you notice, the glottis is a triangular slit, the picture on the C, and the epiglottis is the one on the top of the glottis. Vocal cords. So vocal cords is the primary source of voice production. There are two pairs of ligaments at the thyroid cartilage extended posteriorly, so behind to the arytenoid cartilage, and the two ligaments are known as superior ligament. It is known as vestibular folds, or we call it false vocal cord. When it is false vocal cord, it do not produce sound, and therefore the function is to help to close the airway during swallowing. Inferior ligament is known as the true vocal cord, and it is controlled by posterior and lateral cricoarytenoid muscle, and this true vocal cord is the one that producing sound by changing the shape of the pharynx, and then the oral cavity changes sounds into words. So this is the picture of the vocal cords, and on the right side is the vocal cords in the open position, and on the left side is in the closed position. Okay, so the vocal cords have two ligaments, the superior and the inferior ligament, where the inferior ligament is the one that producing the sound. Superior does not produce sound, but it helps in the swallowing. So what happened during the sound production is that the air move passing through the vocal cords causes them to vibrate and produce sound. For information, male has thick and long vocal cord, which is influenced by the hormone testosterone that vibrates more slowly and produces low-pitched voice. For women, you know, it's actually vice versa. Now there are the one who helps this sound is made. We call it articulators, such as tongue, palate, cheek, and lips, that controls the laryngeal airflow to strengthen or weaken it as a sound source. So for example, if you are actually a normal person, you don't have any cleft lip or cleft palate, meaning to say there's no division in the lips and also at the hard palate, or you are not actually able to talk. So these articulators really helps to make sound and helps you to talk normally. So this is a picture when the vocal cords is, the muscles of the vocal cords is contracting and relaxing, and that changes the pitch. So when there's increased tension, it will be higher pitch. So vocal cords open during breathing to allow air into lungs, and then vocal cords close when speaking so that air from lungs passes between them to cause the vibrations that produce sound. So if you want to see and know about how the vocal cords work, please view the video on the vocal cords posted in this topic. Now a little bit on the laryngeal musculature. Musculature comes from the word muscular or muscles. So there are muscles that help the larynx to actually stabilize. Okay, the muscles of the neck and the pharynx will position and stabilize the larynx. And when swallowing, these muscles elevate the larynx, meaning to say it helps to bring up the larynx, and it bends the epiglottis over the glottis. So what does it mean? The epiglottis is helping to close the area so that when you eat, you will not swallow the food into your trachea, but it is into your esophagus. And there is also intrinsic muscles that control tension on the vocal cords and open the glottis. So here is a picture of what happened during swallowing. You will discover this topic later in the digestive system. If you can see that if you are eating bolus of food shown in the green picture there, your epiglottis will actually cover the upper esophagus sphincter, okay, and then it will cover your trachea, going through into your trachea to allow the food to go back behind your trachea into the esophagus. Alright, so that's the first part of the anatomy of respiratory system on the upper respiratory tract. I will see you in the next video. Thank you.